strangers. All 6 of you. Where on earth did you come from? Well, no matter. I'm glad you're here. This is story number 26. When I was young, I was drawn into the world of James Bond. For me, everything was about being a spy. I was a member of every kids' sleuth club I could find. I burned through all the Hardy Boys and Encyclopedia Browns I could scavenge at the local library. I even saved my allowance and birthday money to buy a Learn to Lockpick set. When they arrived, I had all 3 levels of difficulty picked by nightfall. When I grew up, I was going to be a spy, and I'm one of the lucky ones who got to be what they dreamed of being. But that's the thing about luck. Like a coin toss, luck can be heads, you win good, or tails, you win bad. And sometimes you won't know which kind of luck you have until it's too late. When I said I was a spy, understand I'm not talking of His Majesty's service. I'm a corporate spy. While you'd think this is one of those jobs undone by computers, the ability to slip into a secure facility now outplayed by some nerd at a laptop. I've got stories from as recently as last month that would surprise you by how astoundingly low-tech the job still is. After all, the CEOs of these companies put just as much faith into these new technological marvels, a security system that won't nap like a guard or a dog could. But I also can't take out a guard with a pair of tin snips. No, anybody reading this hoping to hear about wet work, you're going to walk away disappointed. The best in my profession can bypass a mean intrusion detection system by looking for the internet-connected coffee maker with the admin password unchanged from factory settings. Armed with things like that, you can effectively do the same you see nothing hand wave to the new automated security and slip right past, just like you could stride right by an unsuspecting secretary or sleeping guard. I seem to stay busy, so my methods have proven themselves so far. So, a couple of years ago, I got put on what's called a conduct audit. You know those terms of service on your work computers? The little pop-ups you just click by when you log in every morning saying, anything you do on this computer is monitored, blah, blah, blah. Well, the conduct audit is the enforcement of those pesky little pop-ups. Sometimes it's a hush job, a little late considering that usually the problem has been ignored while it was manageable internally. Sometimes it's that launching an internal investigation statement on the corporate social media, usually preceded by, "We are deeply concerned." In my experience, this is generally true, but the concern is for their stock and not writing some exposed big scandal. My paycheck clears either way, I guess. This job, though, was one of the rare ones. From the brief I got, there had been no big, earth-shattering event to prompt my hire. This was just a hybrid break in, see if the worker bees are spending time on the clock making honey, and submit a report. So, I did a couple of drive-bys. I took a look around for motion sensors and cameras, and I did about the same sort of poking about online. I don't want to make this super long or detailed for reasons that will become obvious, so I'll sum it up with stating that while some of the electronic things they had in place were indeed beefy. The protection wasn't complete across the board when it came to the physical, real-world things they could have protected. Think of it like replacing a door with steel, installing 9 deadbolts and a motion sensor, and then leaving the window next to it unlocked. They didn't stop me from running my fake break-in. All they did was ensure I had to go on site and do it in person. I came to the building late that night, parked in the lot the building shared with a restaurant and storage unit, then walked on in like I owned the place. The company was on the 14th floor of an office building, but the elevators had cameras. I got off on the 12th floor and legged it up the stairwell. Bit of a dance there. There were cameras, keypads, etc., but there was a way past them, and I made it to the 14th floor without much delay. Here's a freebie for any business owners out there. If your company was started in 1949 and your keypad is one of those old fixed number ones with the 1, 4, and 9 keys worn away, throw a curveball and make the code something like your 2 favorite combo meal numbers from your favorite fast food restaurant. The office was quiet, save some machines humming away in sleep mode. I flipped over a couple of keyboards until I found the post-it with a password I knew I'd find. I checked the nameplate on the desk. It appeared I owed my thanks to Miss Walters, whose username, first.last, was unlocked by her combined interests of banana bread and her cat, Mittens, forever. Logging in, I started slinking about. The thing about being there in person was having the ability to load some toys with a thumb drive and elevate Miss Walters' privileges so the real games could begin. The first thing I noticed was the traffic. Maybe this conduct audit was sparked by something, after all. The server logs showed pretty sizable traffic, data flying on and off in huge chunks around 2 a.m. every morning. My first thought was espionage, a mole securing a plum position at a rival firm with a little or a lot of insider knowledge. I clicked around, losing track of the time, trying to locate where, or what exactly, was the source of these mass departures and arrivals of data. All the usual suspects, research and development, payroll, accounts billable, were untouched. Then, like banging into a coffee table in a dark room, I hit a set of files that even my root admin superpowers were disallowed from accessing. I doubted that was supposed to be there. My watch vibrated against my wrist. It was 1 a.m. I'd been in for hours. I had plenty for the standard report. Nominal social media usage. Guy in Office D was definitely cheating on his wife with Guy from accounting. Even a few little cleanup jobs to toss to their IT folks. Like, hey, maybe you should update your antivirus occasionally. But something about these weird, impenetrable files bugged me. You know what it was? It was the file names. I couldn't see in, but I could see what they'd been called. Innocuous names like Brenda, Family Vacation, 2014, and Cheryl's Vegas Adventure. They would be glanced at and forgotten on a guy's home PC, but locked down harder than a company's finances and nestled on a corporate server farm? Was it possible whoever had uploaded or created the files had literally ported them from a home computer and left the file names unchanged? I clicked about in the logs, trying to locate what account had put these files in. But it was thousands of logs, and I was already up past my bedtime. The office was quiet for the moment, but all it would take was one early bird, and my careful sneaking would be for naught. I had a choice. I could call it, write up my report, collect my pay, and move on to my next adventure. Or I could dig in further and scratch the itch forming in my brain as I looked at the mysterious clump of files. In all situations such as these, I asked myself the same question. WW007D. I popped in a removable drive, and 10 minutes later was making my way briskly back to the street, the last year's worth of audit logs in my bag. Once at home, yawning and ready to rack out, I connected the drive to one of the crappy laptops I kept around for, let's call it, gray area work. Purchased off Craigslist, eBay, or random refurbs, these laptops lived a life of isolation. No account of mine, not even a Words with Friends app, was ever logged in. I paid in cash. In other words, if I found something nasty, my name and hands stayed clean of it. I threw a couple of scripts onto the logs to winnow down file uploads, key terms, and finally, I hit the hay. When I awoke, I had an answer that led to more questions. Great. The account that had so savvily protected the files was the account of the CEO's son. What, oh what, was Junior up to? Did Daddy CEO know and set an outsider on his kid to enforce discipline he couldn't? Or did he not know who was behind the traffic himself? I checked my email, and like my thoughts had summoned him, Big Daddy CEO himself had jotted a little message, pulsing for status. I sat there for a moment, then set my phone aside. I brushed my teeth, found a shirt that didn't make my nose wrinkle too much, and hit it with some spray deodorant as I chewed on how to reply. The wording of the email was casual, a check-in, but there was a telltale nervous chuckle in the last line. I trust if you found anything too objectionable, you would, of course, allow us to address it with the same discretion your role implies. That's the thing about lies by omission. They require you to, omit not only the part you don't want to bring up, but also omit saying things that sound like you're omitting something in the first place. Ask yourself, if the guy truly didn't think there was anything there, why would he have to ask me to keep it quiet and not tell anyone? I mean, tell anyone about what, if you don't know there's a what in the first place? Daddy CEO knew, or at least suspected, and suspected it was something odious enough that he only wanted to deal with it in a dry report and not get involved himself. I tapped out a reply saying I was backed up on a case across the bridge, but to still expect the confidential report by the end of the week as planned. Why admit I had already been in, or left myself a little back door? Daddy CEO wasn't the only one who could omit things. Speaking of, I dragged the laptop over to me, bringing the drive with it clacking along the tiled countertop. After grabbing a couple of Red Bulls from the fridge, I packed up my bag and headed to the car. As I drove, those little doubts crept in, telling me, "You're making too big a deal of this. It's probably just outsourced data backup services. Not everything is high treason and espionage." And those little doubts were probably right. War driving for some unsecured business Wi-Fi was probably a waste of time. But something about those file names, some pattern, was bugging me. On the other side of the city, where apartments nestled against restaurants and bars, and strange cars loitering would not stand out, I found a guest Wi-Fi for a pet shop and connected, then used a VPN to throw my scent clear of the area. From there, I headed into my little mouse hole and started gnawing at the cluster of files again. Forgive me for, again, not going into a ton of detail, but what I was doing, even with the CEO's permission, it's not illegal. Besides, James Bond never showed you how he pulled a rocket launcher out of a cigarette case. Just know that the glamour of TV and movies doesn't really touch on how much of the gig is running mindless script soldiers at walls, hoping, given enough time, they'll break through. This wasn't near as stealthy as I'd like. By now the office was likely in full swing. But I was banking on my attack being as obscured as what I was attacking. Basically, I'd had to dig to find Brenda's Family Vacation 2014 and Cheryl's Vegas Adventure. If my poking was limited to such files, the IT folks were unlikely to see an account that looked local, limited to accessing files they likely didn't know existed and were not monitoring. As my little code minions kamikazed, I began poking about on the legit web with my phone, just seeing what I could find out about the file's owner, CEO Junior. He had a typical LinkedIn, a few page 6 social events, but digging a bit deeper, I found some speculation that Junior was looking into cryptocurrency. I guess he'd approached someone to show him the ropes, and that someone wasn't as discreet as he'd hoped. Could Junior be using the family business to mine crypto? It would certainly explain all the cloak and dagger nonsense. Server farm getting cranked into high gear at weird hours, supporting tons of traffic. It was a clean theory, very logical, very understandable, and I hated it. You guessed why. The file names. What was it about those file names? I checked the laptop. One of my little soldiers had found a way in. I held my breath, and as I clicked into the first file, Brenda's Family Vacation 2014, I thought about why the file names were bugging me. Was it that they were all named girl names? Surely a Brenda and a Cheryl would have similarly mundane pictures and folders of Harold's new car and Clark's fun run. The fact that it was only girls seemed like someone was winking at me. But about what? Oh God. I felt my eyes bulge at what I was seeing in the preview thumbnails in the folder. My acidy gut, full of Red Bull, lurched like a man in an earthquake, sending a burn up my esophagus. I slammed the laptop shut. I fought every instinct to throw it out of the car, set it, the car, the world on fire to purge what I had seen. Instead, I set it aside, gaping through my windshield, trying to record over what I'd seen, what now lived in my head. Instead, I popped the car door open, leaned over, and the contents of my stomach seemed to just fall out without any retching. I dumped energy drink onto the pavement like I was pouring it from a heated carafe. I didn't see the puddle. I saw a replay of my memory of the thumbnail previews, video files, hundreds of them, and as tiny as the thumbnails were, I saw enough. I saw too much. No matter how many martinis, shaken or stirred, I've drunk since, those images will never disappear. My phone buzzed. Another client. I pushed it away and saw that Daddy CEO had already replied to my earlier message. If his first message wasn't suspicious, the fact that a CEO of a major company had time for near instant replies was. But how could I reply back? Times like this, I wish I'd gone the federal route. Although the red tape would be a drag, at least occasionally, you get to shoot people. I drove home. I thought about tearing the platter out of the laptop, but I stopped myself. It was proof. While I hadn't gotten the best read on the man, the CEO didn't seem like he knew enough about blockchain to be using the family business to launder human suffering for cryptocurrency. And that, I figured, was where the crypto fit in. It was probably how Junior was taking payments to access his stash. I started to email, stopped, and instead clicked around on my phone, finally putting the receiver to my ear as it connected and began to ring. Miss Banana Bread and Mittens Forever herself picked up. She sounded younger than I'd read her desk as. After a moment and a polite "hold please," I was talking to Daddy CEO himself. He was polite. He was to the point. He was absolutely losing it that his hired external conduct auditor had broken protocol and reported in early with a phone call. Well, you and me both, pal. We're both disappointed our business won't be ending with a perfunctory and detached little report. After a minute of blather, I cut in, asking him, "Did you know?" He paused, exhaled. He began to say he hated to think something unseemly could be happening. He told me that his employees were like family. My thoughts were too loud to hear how he finished that sentence. Like family. Oh, buddy. Another flash of what I'd seen. My body gave a convulsive shudder. I cut in again. Like family? He stuttered, stalled. His voice came back, sounding resigned. He told me Junior had problems. He paused. I wanted to scream. I wouldn't. James Bond wouldn't scream. I kept my tone level. I told him no, he had problems. He had a looser interpretation of business deductions than Uncle Sam would have liked. He had a keypad that might as well have a post-it with the password stuck next to it. His son, I spat that word, didn't have problems. He had a thriving business in torture, and he was running it under Daddy CEO's family crest. Sputtering, anger, beginnings of denial. I sat, wishing I had a cigarette to mark the time with, letting him realize that my silence was as impenetrable to his weak protests as Junior's servers had been against my script soldiers. Finally, he came back, sounding ill but resolute, asking me how large a bonus would be appropriate for such discretion. I lost it. Bonus. I told him, sure, let's bring money into this, because I needed money from his tainted pockets. He wanted to buy his son out of trouble and pretend those girls. It was his turn to interrupt me. A camel through the eye of a needle. That's what he said. I was stumped, stopped flat by his seemingly disconnected statement. My mind was racing, but I found the thread. I told him I'd take my pay as agreed. No bonus. His blood money would cost far too much for me to carry a cent of it. And with that, I hung up. I was proud of that line. That was a 007 level of short but devastating, I told myself. Very cool. James Bond would approve. Then I bent over and threw up until I cried. In acknowledgement of the heinous wrong I'd been made to see, the universe eased up. The next week was gentle with me. Mr. CEO, man, did he overpay me. I worked with auto deposits only. I had no check to grandly tear up in front of his board of executives. Fine. I'd need it. I wasn't sleeping, and in one of my late-night online hunts, I'd found myself looking up therapy. I was a drowning man, dragging his hands through the water, looking for something, anything to latch onto, my legs tiring with every kick to keep my head above the water. The next client was a simple pen test, just a round of capture the flag nonsense, against, as it turned out, an anti-malware suite, 4 updates behind the latest version. People, click yes to install your updates. I numbly broke through behind another set of Bash and PowerShell soldiers. I did not look around when I got in, but even as I clicked through to the file I needed to edit to show I'd been in, my stomach was forcing too much spit into my mouth. The very sensation of wandering around in a similar business network was too close, too familiar. I saved my edits. I looked down at my keyboard, and I closed my eyes. All I could see were wide, frightened eyes, smeary with tears. Everything in me convulsed. Tears dumped out of my eyes. My lunch dumped out onto my lap. I finally stopped crying in the shower. I resolved to take some time off after that one. I called up a friend. I booked us a Dude Ranch Experience package in Wyoming and headed to the airport. I just needed to get away from it all. Just because the universe was playing nice now didn't mean it didn't have one last surprise waiting for me at the airport. Because at the airport, I saw the front pages of newspapers reporting the blaze at a very familiar address. The fire had taken out the 14th and 15th floors. Official reasoning, either by luck or bribe, chalked it up to faulty wiring in the unoccupied top level. It was no loss. I'd thought about nuking that evil from orbit myself, but I'd left it alone. Way too easy to blame me for the whole mess the more I touched it, and it had already touched me back. The papers were only mentioning the blaze as a teaser, an aperitif. In another stroke of tragedy, there had been a loss of life. You guessed it. CEO Jr. had been in the building at the time and was reported to have died of smoke inhalation. I read this without feeling anything about it. No righteous pride at such a monster being slain. The death was labeled accidental, but with no surprise, no guessing, just solid knowing. I knew it wasn't an accident. The Bible quote, the rage only coming out of the old man when I brought up his family crest. No surprise at a father unknowing how to correct his son's unforgivable sins, or unwilling to try at the cost of the family name, deciding to purge the problem with righteous fire. I just had to unplug. I tossed the paper aside, boarded my flight, and didn't look back. This was, again, a couple of years ago. I'm doing better now. I don't flinch when I'm going about my job mucking about in other people's networks. I reach out to my few friends a lot more, and my therapist, even without knowing the full story, has helped me process a lot of the worst of it. There is no grand finale to this story. A guy killed his kid, either from disgust at his insurmountable crimes or fear of his actions killing the family business. I'll never know which. If I can wrap it up with a moral, it's a two-parter. 1. Get therapy. Therapy is cool. 2. Beware of nepotism. It's all fine and well when mommy gifts a cherry title in the family store to her wayward daughter, or a promotion is passed between two people of the same last name. But be wary. Nepotism is a bus that goes both ways. And when faced with that same family name being dragged through the mud, it may be that they will choose their family name over the very people who carry it. I don't mind telling you that after some stories, I kinda just need to go for a walk. Until next time, like, comment, subscribe, notify. Every Tuesday we're here, and on a few surprise days too. Take care, strangers.